Before the name.
She turns her back to the camera and flexes. The pose feels familiar now. The back, the arm, the muscle offered to the lens. But this is not yet female bodybuilding, not in the modern sense. There is no competition stage here, no fitness magazine, no gym identity, no stable category waiting for her. What we see belongs to an earlier world: circus, vaudeville, music hall, physical culture. These women were called strongwomen, sometimes circus athletes, sometimes performers. Sometimes they were given mythic names: Lady Hercules, Vulcana, Sanguina. The names are theatrical because the culture around them is theatrical. Their strength is real, but the image has to make that strength visible. It has to frame it, dress it, stage it, turn it into something the public can understand. And that is what makes these photographs so strange. They show a female body trained for strength before female strength had a settled, visual language. Before bodybuilding had a name, the strong woman already had an image.
The strong woman.
The strong woman was not simply a woman with muscles. She was a role, a public figure, a profession of display. She belonged to the circus ring, to the variety theater, to the fairground poster, to the publicity photograph. Her strength had to be demonstrated, not merely suggested. She could lift another performer, hold a weight, bend metal, break a chain, turn the impossible into a repeatable act. But the photograph rarely shows the training. It shows the claim. This woman can do what the audience does not expect a woman to do. That is why the image keeps moving between proof and fantasy. The costume says theater. The smile says entertainment. The pose says look. But the muscle says something harder to dismiss. The strong woman is not yet the modern athlete. She stands at the edge of sport, spectacle, and social provocation. A body on display, but also a body making an argument.
The stage.
The stage is not just the place where the strong woman appears. It is the system that makes her visible. The costume matters. The background matters. The name printed above the body matters. Everything around her says, this is not ordinary strength. This is strength prepared for an audience. A strong woman could not simply be strong. She had to be readable. Readable as power. Readable as entertainment. Readable still as a woman. So the image holds two demands at once. The body must astonish, but it must also perform. The arm is exposed. The muscle is shown. But the body is dressed in theatrical signs: fabric, ornament, pose, profile, smile. This is where the image becomes unstable. It asks the viewer to admire strength, but it also asks the viewer to look. The stage gives her visibility, but visibility has a price. Her power enters the public world through spectacle, and that is why these photographs are not simple documents of athletic achievement. They are stage images, publicity images, images of a body made powerful, but also made available to the gaze.
The pose.
The pose is never neutral. It tells the viewer where to look. It selects the muscle. It turns the body into evidence. A bent arm is not only an arm, it is a statement. A turned back is not only a back, it is a surface prepared for display. The strong woman does not simply stand before the camera. She arranges herself, sideways, frontal, from the back, with one arm raised, with both arms lifted, with the body held still long enough to become readable. This is important because strength is difficult to photograph. A lift can happen in time. A performance can happen on stage. But a photograph has only one frozen instant. So the pose has to do the work. It must show that the body is trained. It must show that the strength is real. It must also make that strength legible to people who may not yet know how to read it. That is why these images often resemble both theater and anatomy. The face may smile. The costume may decorate. But the arm, the shoulder, the back, the thigh, these become the real vocabulary of the photograph. The pose is not just presentation, it is translation. It translates force into shape, action into stillness, muscle into image. And in that translation, something changes. The female body is no longer shown only as something to be admired. It is shown as something capable, something trained, something that can answer the camera with force.
The gaze.
The gaze is part of the performance. These photographs do not only show strength, they organize looking. The viewer is invited to admire the body, but also to examine it. The arm, the shoulder, the waist, the costume, the exposed skin. Nothing here is completely accidental. The strong woman stands before the camera as a public image. She is displayed, but she is not simply passive. She knows she is being looked at. Sometimes she looks away, as if the pose were made for an unseen audience. Sometimes she smiles, turning strength into charm. Sometimes she faces the camera directly, and the image becomes more difficult. Because then the gaze is not only ours. She looks back. This is where the photographs become unstable. They can be seductive, they can be theatrical, they can be promotional, they can even feel strangely modern. But beneath all of that, there is a negotiation. How can a woman show strength without being made only into spectacle? How can the image display the body without reducing the body to display? There is no simple answer in these photographs. The stage gives visibility. The camera preserves it. But both also control the terms on which the body appears. And yet something exceeds that control. The muscle interrupts the costume. The pose interrupts the smile. The body interrupts the expectation. The gaze may frame her, but it does not fully contain her.
After the spectacle.
Later, the image begins to change. The circus does not disappear at once. The stage does not simply vanish, but the female body of strength slowly enters other spaces. The beach, the gym, the magazine, the training photograph. The props change. A barbell replaces the theatrical title. Sunlight replaces the studio backdrop. The pose moves closer to sport. But the old question remains, how can strength be shown without being turned entirely into display? There is no straight line from the strong woman to modern bodybuilding, but these photographs prepare a visual language. The flexed arm, the turned back, the body held still, the image that asks us to read muscle as evidence. What began as spectacle becomes, gradually, another kind of visibility, not free from performance, not free from the gaze, but harder to dismiss. The strong woman does not disappear. She remains inside the later image, in the pose, in the confidence, in the insistence that this body can be looked at not only as beauty, but as force. And when we return to the first image, the back, the arms, the muscle offered to the lens, we are not seeing the simple beginning of modern bodybuilding. We are seeing something earlier and more unstable, the moment when female strength learned how to appear.
More visual stories on Reading Frames.